As of late, I've noticed a lot of criticism being leveled at Bearing, Undoomed, and other such content creators that primarily focus around replying to or criticizing other videos. I quickly touched on this in my last video in my response to the one janitor, but I still think that this is a conversation worth having. Conveniently, Michael Rowlands seems to agree with me on this point, so now we're going to be replying to his video directed at Bearing in regards to this topic.
Bearing is a YouTuber whose channel is dedicated to criticizing people he finds to be disagreeable. He creates videos about various people and shares them with his 200,000 subscribers.
So is your problem with him that he has a large following, or that he makes videos about people that he disagrees with? And if you don't have a problem with either of those things, why did you bring it up? In reality, you have a problem with both of those things, because you don't approve of the way in which Bearing responds to the people he responds to, and because he has a large following, you don't like that he sometimes goes after people with smaller followings than him.
That in itself is fine, I can live with that. But it is what happens afterwards that I find to be so intolerable. Bearing has an influence over his subscribers, as many people with large fan bases do, and Bearing uses that influence to bully and harass the people he doesn't agree with into silence.
And in what way does Bearing have influence over us, aside from making us aware of the people he's responding to? If Bearing himself isn't leaving any of the objectionable comments or dislikes, and he isn't instructing other people to leave dislikes or comments either, then you are merely attributing the behavior of other people to him.
Here's an example of a channel that Bearing has targeted. Notice the views on the targeted video. They're disproportionately higher to the rest. Now notice the dislikes on the targeted video. Again, disproportionately high. And the comments?
And by targeted, you mean responded to, the thing you initially said you didn't have a problem with. Bearing did not call for those views, comments, or dislikes. Those are other people, not Bearing.
It seems clear to me that in creating a video about another YouTuber, Bearing influences his audience to view that original video. It also seems clear to me that once they are there, they spit hate, bile, and abuse all over the comment sections of these videos, as well as leaving thousands of dislikes. Any honest person would admit these things.
It is through Bearing that many of us become aware of these types of videos, but in what way does Bearing influence us to watch them? Had we become aware of these videos from any other source, would our reactions be different? I don't think so, because it's not Bearing that convinces me to disagree with the people in the videos he responds to. What you're complaining about is an unavoidable side effect of increased exposure.
Bearing seems like a reasonably smart guy, so I would assume that he would agree that these things are true as well. The question is Bearing responsible for this abuse? Is he responsible for something that he knows happens after he's done a thing? Is the fact that his intention, he claims, is not to incite hatred and promote abuse of people he disagrees with, mean that he is, therefore, not responsible for this abuse and hatred?
It's not only that he doesn't intend harm, it's also that he's not the one carrying out harm. Again, your problem is the comments and dislikes left by others. A YouTuber's audience isn't a mindless horde that can be wielded as a weapon at will. It is a collection of individual thinking entities. And each of those entities is responsible for their own actions.
Should he be allowed to remain apathetic towards the horrible things that happen in his name? Should a person be held accountable for their actions when it is painfully clear that those actions are causing other people harm, distress, or to be silenced?
Bearing isn't responsible for anything done in his name because he isn't calling for anything to be done in his name. And he can't control what's done in his name because he doesn't have control over who his audience is.
If a person gets drunk and drives their car into a crowd of people, killing and maiming dozens, should they be held responsible for something they knew could happen if they chose to drive drunk? Does the fact that their intention was not to harm these people matter in the slightest? Should they be allowed to remain apathetic towards the results of their choices and get behind the wheel and drive drunk again? No.
What a horrible analogy to illustrate your point. In your story, the subject, that is, the drunk man, is the direct cause of the harm being described. That's the person who left the dislike. That's the person who left the comment. Is the bartender who sold that alcohol to the drunk man responsible for the people the drunk man killed? Is the brewery who sold the beer to the bartender to sell to the drunk man responsible for the deaths of those people? Why do you go further up the chain of events than the drunk man?
Bearing is a bully, intentionally or not. Bearing claims that he is against the behavior exhibited by much of his audience, that he has a disclaimer on his videos that discourages abuse and harassment, and yet it does not stop. I propose that if Bearing actually cared about bullying and harassment, that he would make ongoing, vocal pronouncements of his opposition to this behavior.
And would that be fun to make or entertaining to watch? Because on YouTube, Bearing is primarily an entertainer. To atone for sins he hasn't committed, you want him to take up a moral crusade.
Today I liked a video by a small YouTuber who was talking about feminism. Almost immediately after this, Bearing tweeted a winky face at this. He then went to the comment section of the video to comment, and the views and the dislike ratio were pretty normal at this point. About 4 hours later, he released a video about this girl, and since then the views and dislikes and awful comments have been swiftly rising. And in fact, some of Bearing's fans even admit they were sent there by Bearing. And as of an hour after Bearing releasing his video, the original video was removed from YouTube.
So one of your viewers, Bearing, engaged in activity that you did not instruct him to engage in or approve of, because you made him aware of a video he wasn't previously aware of. Either acknowledge that you're responsible for the exact same kind of bullying you're accusing Bearing of being responsible for, or acknowledge that you're a hypocrite.
Now, Bearing knows I care deeply about internet harassment and abuse. He knows that I think him to be one of the worst spearheaders of this kind of behavior in the YouTube community. So it seems odd to me that Bearing would make one of his criticisms about a feminist video that I liked immediately after I liked it, even going so far as to credit me for pointing it out to him, and still claim that he is not complicit in the harassment and abuse and silencing of dozens of other YouTubers.
I find it a bit hard to believe that you're actually that concerned with cyber violence, seeing as, by your own standard, you engaged in cyber violence. I find it amazing that someone can flail around reality with such little self-awareness.
Bearing knows what he is doing, and he uses it to silence those who don't agree with him, and when those people don't back down, he uses it to get under their skin. I was not intimidated by his attempts to silence me, and now he's going after my ideals. It is a cowardly, reprehensible bullying tactic.
It is not cowardly, reprehensible bullying to assail someone's ideals, you intellectual weakling.
He is willing to subject a smaller, younger YouTuber to waves of abuse and harassment just so that he can get a rise out of me.
Well, I take it you're not going to be responding to this video then, because as a smaller, younger YouTuber, I'm too new and fragile. I publish content for public consumption. Just because I'm new to the platform doesn't mean I'm owed any special protection. I'm not an emotional invalid that needs you to white knight for him, and that you assume that smaller YouTubers fit this description is fucking laughable.
This is not a man who deserves support. He does not deserve money. He does not deserve a platform. He does not deserve a place among the YouTube community. What he does deserve is to be exposed for the immature, cowardly bully that he is.
Who are you to preside over whether or not someone deserves to be paid for their work? The YouTube community, if you insist on calling it that, includes millions and millions of people. That you want all of them to share your sensibilities, else be denied a voice, is shameful, even by the low standard you've set for yourself.